Welcome to the weekend interview at the Inside Running Podcast. A massive thank you for tuning in. I know there's a lot of running podcasts out there these days, so very, very grateful that you chose ours to listen to this weekend. I'm stoked to bring this one to you. It's an interview with Dan Osborn Nash. He's based in the UK. Was previously the 50k record holder over there in the UK. Is a 2:15 guy, 66 minutes at the half. 29 low for the 10k, and pretty much I think about 14 19 for the 5k. But most importantly, I think in this conversation is his expertise in exercise physiology. He's the guy that gets in the lab and tests his lactate the week of the marathon to then know what pace he can do on the weekend. He has some amazing stuff in here about pacing and fueling. So if you know someone who's doing a marathon coming up, I'm thinking about the people that I coach who've got Gold Coast coming up. There's some brilliant stuff in here that everyone can use when they're thinking about their pacing for upcoming marathons and how to get it right and how to be in a good situation halfway through the race to be able to reach a potential in that second half there. So yeah, I obviously took a lot from it. I think he's got some very, very good points and very, very switched on guy and super passionate. Like, you can, you'll hear it. I hardly get a word in throughout the whole conversation because he just goes into so much detail and has so much enthusiasm that it's, I got a lot out of listening to it, and time went super fast when he was chatting. So if you know someone who's got a race coming up, definitely flick it to them over the next couple of days. Yeah, super switched on guy. Hope you enjoy it. Have a great weekend. See you later for the weekly episode next week. Bye. All right, this weekend on the Inside Running Podcast, I'm very excited to talk to this person. Been following his stuff on Twitter recently, and I think I'm going to title this episode "How to Run Your Best Marathon" with Dan Osborn Nash. Welcome to the Inside Running Podcast, Dan.
Thanks, Brady. Great to be here.
Just talking off air, tell the listeners whereabouts in the world you're based at the moment. They know I'm in Echuca, Moama, about 2.5 hours north of Melbourne. But where do you join us from tonight?
Today I'm working from home. I'm in the Welsh Valleys, just north of Cardiff and Newport. Lovely day here. Sun's just about to come out. Been if you've been in the UK, you'll know the weather's been rubbish. But yeah, it's feeling hot here at 16 degrees, and I laugh at 16 degrees, but that's feeling hot because of how bad it's been recently. But
how hot will it get over the next couple of weeks, or maybe like a month?
It's the UK's so variable. Like sometimes you can hit 30 degrees, or it might be like in the low teens, like all through the summer. We've had lots of that recently, so hoping it will warm up a bit.
Yeah,
not too hot though. It's nice. It's good. I think that's one of the reasons why there's some good runners in the UK. It's a great environment. It never gets too hot, never gets too cold. Really, it's always pretty good for running.
Surely it hardens you guys too, and girls mentally. You reckon when you get to a start line, it's a bit of shitty weather. You guys we're used to this. This is no dramas. We're very resilient.
I'm soft these days. I've got a treadmill I can run on at home. I've got a treadmill at work I can run on. So I'm if it's a bit rubbish outside, I'll hop on the treadmill. I'm too old for mucking around with getting cold and wet and battered by winds. Sometimes you just got to put a jacket on and just suck it up. But if I'm doing if I want to do a session, I can go run in the dry with some music on the treadmill, and it's just more pleasant.
Yeah. Give us your age before we get going as well tonight. How old are you?
I've just turned 30.
Oh,
I've just turned 30. So hopefully a few more competitive years. Not too old, but yeah, a new dad as well. I've got a 2-year-old boy, so I'm feeling like I'm aging without being old yet.
Feeling every part of 30 when you got a 2-year-old, I'd reckon. Hey, tell me about working from home as well. Does that include doing podcasts and stuff, or we got to be careful about what we say? Are you on the clock at the moment?
No, I'm lucky. I've got a pretty flexible job. Yeah, as long as I get my work done, it's fine. And I think hopefully we'll talk about a bit of my work today, and I can just sell it as advertising our services as well.
We will for sure, mate. We want to get to your expertise without a doubt. What we do on this show, though, traditionally is we go through the guest's PB. So I'm going to start with the 5K, 14:18. Got that correct? Any significant stories about that one?
I think that's one of my weaker ones. I'd like to run a bit faster, but that was on the roads, preparing for a marathon. nothing too exciting. I was winning the race until like 400 to go. Then I've got no kick, no speed, and like two people went past me in the last. I think one person went past me with like 400 to go. One person got me with like literally like 10 meters to go. So I was pretty gutted because I'd worked my way through the field and got first. But it was a PB, still a PB, and you can never knock a PB.
So, and you'd not been faster on the track. Like, it's pretty rare that people have well, maybe in Australia it is because we don't really have any, like, I guess our 5K road races are at our marathon festivals and it's almost like the kids just do the 5K. Like, you'd never really go anywhere. I don't think, now I'm thinking about it, I've been running for 20 years and I don't think other than a park run have I ever gone to do a 5K road race. It seems to be a real track thing here, and then you do the 10 or the half or the marathon at the bigger festivals. But yeah, you're faster on the roads than you are the track.
Yeah, I've not run a track 5K for quite a few years. There's some really good 5K races around by us. Like there may be like just specific 5K races. There's like a home countries one, which is often in Cardiff, which is England versus Scotland versus Wales in the 5K. This one was like the Cardiff 5K, which is like really good standard. It's often like Welsh champs and stuff like that. So yeah, there are some good 5K races, and track. I just don't know. I would like to go back. I said I was going to go back on the track this summer, but it's just I don't know. It's a more intense environment. My wife did a 3K recently, and on the track, and I sort of made me want to do it again, but I don't know. I like the super shoes as well. I don't think the spikes give me as much, and I'm always training for something longer. And I just use a 5K as just a nice test to see where I'm at, and I like racing as well.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I'll
I
pick
think
you.
I've run 14:22
Okay.
in old school spikes. So I feel like that was probably worth a bit. Even if I was in Dragonflies or something, it's probably worth a bit quicker. That was quite a long time ago now, though.
Yeah. I do want to, I'll ask you this now, but I definitely want to get into your expertise with like the testing of the shoes and stuff like that as your job as a exercise physiologist as well. But do you think, I have this theory, the longer I spend in super shoes, which I guess I mean like the longer period it is since my track races, the more significant I notice the difference when I go to jump back in a pair of spikes and jump on a track or in a cross country race. And I'm like, oh shit, like I really need some carbon plates under my feet if I want to run well in this race. It just seems like it's like really obvious for me now. Is there any science behind that statement?
I don't know. I mean, like, yeah, I think if I went to put on a pair of like the proper, centimeter thick flats that I used to run in now, I think my calf would blow up, to be honest. Like, it's all right on a cross country when it's nice and soft, but then I don't. I think it's fine. I've done yeah. I think it's quite nice. I sort of feel like that's like proper racing these days. Like there's no, yeah, it's no times. It's just about the position. Like you can't say, oh, if I was in this shoe or that shoe, I'd have run faster or slower, whatever. But yeah, I think there's probably something to be said about like if you're running in super shoes all the time, you're gonna get your decondition, like those smaller muscles in your calves and in your feet, um, which probably doesn't matter if you're in super shoes, but you're probably really going to notice it if you go back into something less supportive, less bouncy. Um, so yeah, I think that is probably something to pay attention with. It's probably not, yeah, not, I reckon, don't think it's a performance issue, but maybe like long term, maybe we'll see people like decondition in their lower legs because they just don't have to work as much when they're
Yeah.
in. You got a carbon plate stiffening everything up, and you've got nice soft shoes to bounce along in.
Yeah, true. Okay, 10K. So I'm not sure if this is a road or track as well, but 29:23.
Yeah, road again. I've done a few 10Ks in my track, always really bad. I've got them. I've only ever run one at Highgate 10K, the night of 10,000 meter PBs, which is like the best event ever. But I've always run badly there, which just because I think not being often it's been like it's the wrong time of year if you're a marathoner and you come run a marathon in like the April, then you try and run a 10K in the sprint in the May. It's normally pretty challenging. But yeah, no, 10K on the road. It was one of those ones where like, I was trying to break 30 minutes for eight, for like, literally like a decade. Like I think I ran like 23 or something as a 20-year-old. And I was like, rah. And I think I went at that time, I was like, right, next year I'll smash 30 minutes. I'll go well under. And it took me until 2022, I think. But I didn't, but then I ran around 29, 23. So it was not just going, I ran like a minute PB or something. So your super shoe is obviously part of that, but I'd like to think that's worth more than just the super shoes. And that was like pretty big breakthrough for me. And
Did
I
you
was,
win the race when you
I
ran
mean, it was
that?
crazy. I was at the Trafford. I think I was at Telford 10K, which is, if you're in the UK, you'll know it's like where everyone goes to run fast. It's super fast. Um, but I think I ran 29, 23. I think I was only like 10th, 12th or something like that. It was it was a crazy field.
Yeah,
But
big.
luckily, I've got pretty close to that a couple of times now. I've run between 29, 20 and 29, 30, like well, I think 3 times now. Um, so I need to get that. I'd like it'd be great to sneak it to sub 29. I think that's a dream.
Yeah.
That's not sneak it 29, sub 29, and then and a sub 14 as well. Really, sub 14, sub 29. Then I can leave the short distances. Like that's not enough to make a team, but just for my own like yeah, satisfaction at the end of like looking back at what I could do. That'd be a nice barrier to tick off.
It's something about just being able to call yourself a 13-minute 5K guy and a 28-minute 10K guy as well. I'm the same. My 5K is 14:09 and my 10's 29:25, and just like, oh, you feel like you're well and truly under 15 and 30, but you don't get the bragging rights to say you're a 13-minute guy or a 28-minute guy as well.
Yeah,
But it's just, 100 meters in these kind of examples.
exactly. I'd take a 28:59 any day of the week. That'd be fine. 28-minute 10K runner, isn't it? 28:59.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now, I
yeah.
was interested, you said before that the 5K is potentially one of your weaker ones, but looking at your half, and maybe I've got this wrong, 66:16?
No, that's definitely a week as well. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I just haven't run. I just haven't given it half a good go in a while. I don't think. I've been like, I think in Valencia I went out in
Yeah.
67:25 or something, and like I think like the last half of my Manchester marathon where I ran 2:15, I ran 67 as well. So I think I've been shaped to run. You always say everyone always says this to me, but I think I'd have been in shape to run like 64 high or something, based upon like where I've done testing and like what I've run over 10K and what I've run over the marathon. Like that's definitely a weak one. But like I think the 5K is weak because I feel like I think I went, you know, 29, 23 back to back is like 14, 40 X, something. So like surely I can run another should be running more than 20 seconds quicker than that over 5K. But yeah,
Are you
no,
run?
half's definitely weak. I think that was like my last race before COVID, is where Matt was from.
Okay,
So
yeah. Well, that kind of
that was like
answers.
a big half, and if you a big half's not a super quick one
Yeah.
in London. It's from cobblestones. It's always windy. But again, there's PB. But I think I ran 66:47 in like I remember a pair of New Balance flats it's again in 2014. Like I remember my calves being blown up for like a week afterwards, just barely could walk. Uh, and again, I was thinking, oh well, yeah, in a couple of years, now I'll be running like 63, 62. So if I can run this now at 20 years old, 66:47, I'll be flying. But that's not how it works, is it? It's you don't make as much improvement as you keep running over the years.
Yeah, and I think when you do run those PBs, especially at a young age, it comes so easy as well. They're generally off like you just feel comfortable the whole way, and it's a dream race, and you kind of kick home, and you just think, oh wow, if I can hurt myself a bit different, if you're further from the finish line and things like that, I can take off a significant amount once you chuck on some more training.
Yeah,
But it doesn't often happen like that.
yeah, 100%. That was my second ever half. And my first one was in where was it? In Madrid, and in Madrid, yeah, it was in Madrid, and I had a shocker. Like it was like I ran, well, not a shocker. I ran 71 minutes, but like I was in good shape at the time. Uh, and it was just like shock the system. First half, I'd done loads of 10Ks, and then like yeah, Cardiff, yeah, ran Cardiff half like a few months later, 66:47, and that was my PB for a very long time.
Yeah.
But you just go in a bit naive. I think when we're just starting out, you just go, I just go run this, and you just sometimes it pays off and you have a great race, and sometimes it's awful, and you just I think you just go you just I think there's less pressure some ways because you've not done that many, and you just run it a bit fearless and a bit naive and see what happens.
Yeah, and it says a lot about like being grateful for when you do run your PBs. Like not just focus, oh, yeah, it was good, but I would have loved to break 66, or just moving on to a different goal straight away, actually taking that time to just, be content with it and grateful for it, and then giving it some time before you think about the next goal, which I think as distance runners, we're terrible at. We always want more. Like I've got a mate who just wanted to break 3 hours, and then it's like, I just want to break 2:55, and now I won't be having until I run 2:45, and you're just like, the goalposts consistently are moving.
Yeah, I think we're all guilty of that, isn't it? And it's just sometimes you just got to step back and go, actually, you know what? All those PBs, like, I'm pretty proud of them. Like, it took a lot of work to get there, and like, you've just got to, even if you don't ever run any faster, like, I'm pretty happy with what I've achieved. I think I've got a lot out of myself. I don't think I was ever the most talented runner. I was always good, like going through the age groups. Like, I've run my whole life basically, and like going through like the age groups, I was always in the like top 30 at the national cross country champs. Like, I always be 20 to 30th every year. I'll be between 20th and 30th, and so I obviously had some talent, but I wasn't a freak. And I feel like that's what I like about running and combining it with the science of it, is just trying to get every bit out of yourself and go, right, let's try and optimize it as much as we can. What are your limits? And like, no one's ever going to get to their limit, but let's get as close as we can. And I think that's like why running appeals to me, and why I've been doing it for literally my whole life, and still like I can't see myself not racing, not running, not trying to, I know at some point I'm not going to be able to run PBs anymore, but I think it'd always be a challenge to go chase.
Yeah. Now, your marathon, you ran 2:15 twice, 2:15:34 at Manchester and 2:15:19 at Valencia. That was December 2023 as well, which was a significant day for the Australian running community, because we had 3 Australians run pretty quick there, with Jean Gregson, Isabel Doyle, Lisa Waitman. Eloise Wellings was also there as well, and we had Tom DeCano run 2:11. So that was a race that a lot of us were following. But when I see these 2 times, like, I haven't run Manchester, but I've run Valencia, and I'm sure that Manchester's nowhere near as quick or as deep as Valencia. So are there 2 different stories for those 2 different 2:15s?
Yeah, I mean, actually, Manchester that year, it was the trials for the Europeans, and it was the trials for the European 50K champs as well. And it was the trials for the England team for the Commonwealth Games. So actually, it was pretty stacked. And we were also blessed with, actually, Manchester is very flat. It's very flat, but you can never, conditions you never know what they're going to be like. But it just happened to be a day where it was like 5 degrees on the start line, no wind at all, and it was just perfect. And you had and there were people to run with. Now everyone went off chasing the Commonwealth Games time, which was, I think the European and Commonwealth time were like 2:14 and 2:14:30, maybe slightly quicker. But anyway, there were a lot of people who just like, I'm gonna get on that pacer. I'm just gonna run that as long as I can. And I think I was like 30th at halfway, and ended up coming like 6th or 7th, just because people just blew up, and I managed to pace it all right. But that was a massive breakthrough for me. I was in the shape of my life. I'd just gone sub 30 for the first time beforehand. I came 20th at the Liverpool Cross Challenge, which is like the biggest cross country race in the UK. It's the trials for the Europeans every year. I just knew I was like in shape to go on a PB. I'd run 2:18 before, and like I was like, right, this should go great. The caveat being, my son was born like 6 weeks before the start of the Manchester, so it's like, right, okay. I had a bit. I was just had to, I was like, in my mind, I was like, right, I've got to just keep fit for 8 weeks. It'll be fine. 6 weeks, whatever it was. And I was lucky because I had some paternity leave. I took a bit of annual leave as well, so I had about a month off, which was really nice. And there's only so much. Kids, like, babies, just sleep most of the time. My wife was very supportive. Like, she let me go and get out and do some runs. But the work's done by then. If you're fit, you just need to keep it going. And I'd had a few shocking marathons before in terms of pacing, and I was adamant I was just going to get this one right. So I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about this later, but losing my heart rate, really making sure, like, in terms of like checking in on myself, I'm not going to go too fast here, not going to go too fast. Went out ran the first half in 68, finished in 67, to run 2:15. Like, picked off loads of people. I had one of my mates, Ronnie Richmond, who was basically with me every step of the way, which was really nice. Just managed to drop him at the end, the last couple of miles, which for me is really nice. But luckily, he ran a good time as well, so I could be happy for him. But I managed to beat him, so that was good. And it was one of those days you're like, oh my God, this is incredible. Like, pulled this off. Like, I think one other story was this was just, COVID. We're just at the back end of COVID here. I had a meet. Things are starting to get in person again. Had a meeting on the Tuesday, like tiny little box room. On the Wednesday, I get a text from one of them saying, "Oh yeah, I test positive for COVID." I'm like, "Oh, here we go." Like you get taper paranoia anyway, thinking I've got a cold, I'm unwell, and then I've got this hanging over my head as well. But luckily, yeah, didn't catch COVID. Had a great race. It was bittersweet in that I ran 2:15:34. The Commonwealth Games time was 2:15:30. I wouldn't have got picked anyway because of they basically nominate you to the Welsh Flex nominated me to be selected, but then it's up to the Welsh Commonwealth Games committee to then choose. And actually, you probably would have needed to run 2:14, maybe a bit faster to get picked anyway. But when you cross the line, like I was like proper emotional, like delighted. But I had a PB by 3 minutes after a couple of shocking marathons, but also like in my head, I was like, I'm not qualified now. That's it. Realistically, I probably wouldn't have qualified anyway. But yeah, very emotional, very emotional. That was Manchester, I guess.
Yeah, and then Valencia.
Valencia is 2 years later, or nearly 2 years later. And my running's been a bit crap for a couple of years. Getting used to having a kid. He wasn't the best sleeper. He starts nursery and bringing back colds every week. This makes me sound like I begrudge him. He's not. He's fantastic. He's one of the best things that's happened to us.
I get it. I'm a parent. I understand.
He's amazing and great fun. But a challenging 2 years. Like I hadn't run great for a long time. I ran a couple of marathons, not that prepared. I ran 2:19 in both of them. But then it just seemed to sort of start clicking just before Valencia. I did a lab test. It was like the best I'd ever done, and I thought, oh, I'm going well here. Like this is, I think I could run. In my head going in, I would have just like I was happy. Like if I could run a 2:16, a 2:17, just like a solid time, I'd be delighted after not running that well for a couple of years. But then, just suddenly started to click in the last couple of weeks. Did a lab test like the week before. It was the best I'd ever done. Flew out. Conditions were perfect. Started off and ended up on the back of the lead women group and literally ran for them for 30k. They started to slow and I was like, I'm feeling good here. I'm going to push on. So I pushed on. And at one point I thought I was going to go sub 2:15. I thought I was going to run a 2:14. I went through halfway in 67:25 and I was like, oh, I think I can negative split this. And it didn't quite happen, but managed to hang on for a PB. Faster than Paula Radcliffe, which is it was always like a goal. Like you've got to be faster than Paula Radcliffe. You can't be far. You can't have the British women running.
Is that a real UK
But yeah,
thing?
snuck under that, and like I was so emotional at the finish line. I think partly because I just poured everything into a race, and then also just like having like 2 years of running really badly, and just like in my head, I was like, oh, maybe this is it. I'm never going to run fast again. Like. I confess I was in tears at the end. I was just like a complete mess of being completely drained, like nothing left in my body at all, but also just like emotional. And it was it was a like fantastic day. But Valencia helps. Valencia is incredible course. Like I've never been in a marathon where I'm running with people the whole way, and I'm going back again this year because it's just such a good race.
Yeah, awesome. And then, like, when you're talking about I was in the lab, like in the weeks leading in, what exactly are you testing then to get that data that shows you're in shape?
Yeah, I've basically done the same test pretty much. I try and get in the lab before every single marathon. I'm lucky I got a lab. I literally go and test myself. I take my own lactate samples. I'll hook myself up to our metabolic cart to measure my oxygen consumption. And primarily I'm looking at actually where's my threshold sitting. So where's that point where lactate starts to spike up? Where's that, that place you can sustain for about an hour in a competition. And like, I'm pretty consistently holding about 95, 96% of that in a marathon. And that gives me a pretty good guide. I'm on the day, like I'm never gonna go right. This is the pace that my lab says I should run. I'm always, because there's so many other factors on the, like, the fueling and like what's the conditions like, or etc. But it gives me a lot of confidence if I know actually, oh, that was a really good test. I can probably run about 2:15. The one before Valencia, actually, I thought, oh, if it goes perfectly, I could run on 2:14, and it wasn't nearly a 2:14. But yeah. But at the same time, if it's not so great, then I prefer to know and set the expectations now. Like, instead of going, right, you get in a few miles in, you go, this is too hard, I need to back off now. I think it's, and I just like to know. I'm also looking at things like my economy, how efficient I am. I'm not looking at my VO2 max in the last, like, I will get that tested, but not in the couple of weeks before, because it doesn't really matter too much. It's in terms of a marathon performance, like, it's pretty much like, where's your threshold? I'm going to hold. I typically see that if you're well trained, you're holding about 95, 96% of your threshold. And if you're not holding that, then that's probably, you need to do some more marathon specific stuff. Probably you're just not very durable, or you're not getting the fueling right, or you're just pacing it wrong. So that's what I'm looking at, and try and do that. Yeah, I've done it, like, even like the last session before the race, like on the Tuesday, I'll do a sub max test, and it's not that hard. The last couple of stages are a bit hard because you're going to be running a bit above. You're going to be getting down to like 10k pace, but most of it is pretty easy. Typically do like 5-minute stages, going up in speed by 1k an hour each time. I'll start at like 15k an hour, so 4-minute a k, and get up to 20, maybe 3-minute a k pace, and just doing that every time gives me a pretty idea of how it's going to go, what I should be expecting.
Okay, so there is a Twitter thread on this. We'll link it in the show notes. But pretty much, like, you did this tweet a couple of weeks ago that said, I've ran even or negative splits in my last 6 marathons. For example, Manchester 68-67, Newport 70-69, Warsaw 69-69, Valencia 67-67, Newport again 72-70, Belfast 69-69. So for the listeners at home, and there's a lot of them who will be lacing up to do the Gold Coast Marathon in about 2 weeks, they don't have this access to the lab. And I know you go into detail a bit in this Twitter thread, which we'll link in, but you're pretty much using, this is why I found it so fascinating and very simple. You're figuring out what pace you can kind of run for an hour, and you are staying under that for the first hour of the marathon to ensure that you don't blow up, accommodating for that you've got enough carbs and stuff on board. Like, the fueling's also good. The fueling plan's got to be good, that you can run in the back half as well. But this whole like pacing plan, can you go into more details about what it would look like for a general punter out there who may not have this kind of data?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, so I think, like, first, like, this concept of like a threshold, like the pace you could sustain for about an hour. Everyone like talks about threshold, but like if we talk about, it's got so many names as well, like LT2, tempo, like lactate turn point, second threshold. But this pace you can sustain for about an hour. Basically, there's this physiological set point where if you're just below it, you're going to maintain a steady state in terms of, if we measured your lactate, it would stay pretty constant for 90 minutes. So it might be 3 millimole after 15, 3.1, 3.2 after half an hour. Even at the end of an hour, it's still probably like in the threes. Whereas actually, and we could look at your oxygen consumption, it'd do the same. It'd be nice and steady. Your heart rate is going to be pretty steady. But if you go just above this threshold, so say your threshold's at 19k an hour, running at 19 and a half, what you see is, if we ran you at that pace, you can still hold that pace for quite a while, but you'd see that every 5 minutes your lactate would be climbing, your oxygen consumption would be climbing, and basically it's not very sustainable. It's not a steady state. And what would happen is, if you just kept going, if you just kept holding that, your heart rate, your lactate, your RPE, your VO2 would just keep drifting upwards until you reach VO2 max, you'd be completely exhausted. So like in the marathon then, like obviously that above your threshold isn't sustainable. So you need to make sure that you're below your threshold. Now, you can, if you haven't got access to a lab, you've probably got a pretty good idea of the pace you could sustain for an hour. So, if you could look at what you're running in a half marathon, in a 15K, a 20K, a 10-mile race, sort of, you're going to be able to get a pretty good guide.
So let's
If you've
just
got
say,
heart rate data
sorry to
associated with that
yeah.
as well, you're gone.
Oh, sorry to interrupt, but like, let's just say someone's gone, yep, okay, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to I'm 7 weeks out from a marathon. I'm going to do like an hour time trial. Treat it as a bit of a data kind of gathering point. They average 4-minute K pace. Oh, you're a miles man. Can you talk in Ks?
I can do both.
Okay.
I'm more of a miles, but
Okay.
I know a minute K.
Well, it could be 6-minute mile or whatever, like just a nice round number. So they've gone out and they've ran, 6-minute miles or 4-minute Ks, whatever's easiest for you for this hour. So they've identified that this is kind of their starting point with this data. Then how far below should they be on race day then? Sorry, above that pace. Like, is it 4:10 or 4:50 or?
If I was in that example, I would look at the pace. Obviously, I would look at the heart rate as well and go, actually, what was the average for that hour effort? Like, assuming it's a max effort, we'll go, okay, right. Say it came out as 170. Now I'm sure at the end it would probably be up in the 180s. And at the start it might be 160s, but the average is 170. You could treat that as like your heart rate threshold. Like, that's probably going to be pretty close. It might not be exact, but it's not going to be a million miles away. And what I'd be doing is making sure, but basically I don't hit that heart rate too early, or because if you hit that at 5 or 6 miles, like you've gone out too hard. Like, you're gonna end up actually having to slow down in the back end of a race. So and that's effectively what I do. I go, right, I know that my threshold heart rate is always 170. And I know that if I hit 170 too early, it goes badly. And I've got data to show this. I had a couple of, like I said already, I had a couple of marathons. So I did the elite marathon the elite marathon in London when it was just the elite field during COVID, and that was embarrassing because I'd managed to sneak into the field and I had an absolute shocker, and I didn't finish in the end. I think I was just went out too hard and I had some niggles, but regardless, I've got I'm in London Marathon next year again. I had when it was an open the mass field, I ran really badly, and I've got 2 heart rate traces where basically I hit 170 after 6 miles. I hold at 170 for about 5 or 6 miles, and then I can't even sustain that anymore. So by the end, my heart rate is 150, but I'm in a hole. I've hit the wall. I'm plodding along when it feels horrendous, at around 227, I think. So I think it's knowing that you can't hit that too early. Now, you can hit that heart rate in the race, but you need to make sure you're not hitting it until maybe 30K, 40K, 30, 35K. Then it's not about pacing anymore. It's about just working as hard as you can to the finish. And it's going to be a bit variable for each person. It's going to be slightly different if you're running a 2-hour 15 marathon, or if you're running a 3-hour marathon or a 3.5, 4-hour marathon. You're going to have to probably allow for more drift in your heart rate over the course of the event if you're doing a longer race, and make sure you're not hitting. You don't want to be hitting your threshold heart rate after 2 hours, because you might still have an hour and a half of running still to go. But what I would probably use that 96-95% marker as a good guide. So, okay, let's say my threshold heart rate is 170, and my pace is 4 minutes per K. I'd work out, okay, what's 96% of that? I'd probably go err on the side of caution, so maybe 94, 95, and go, right, okay, 170, 95% of that, off the top of my head, that's probably about 162. Right. So the first 10 miles, halfway, 20K, whatever, I want to make sure that I'm well below. I'm hitting that 162, 163 mark. And there's going to be some drift over the course of a marathon, but in terms of your heart rate, but it's going to be reasonably stable, especially if you are actually below your threshold. It's going to drift slowly, but that's all right. You're going to have some drift, but you want to make sure that you're timing it so that when you get to 170, that's actually not too far from the finish line, and then you can just push on. And people think you've got to be under your threshold the whole way. You don't. You can be at the end of a marathon, when I've paced it well, I'm nearly at my max heart rate at the end. My VO2 won't be quite at max, but I'm not far off. And I'm definitely not. If I took my lactate levels, it would definitely be elevated. I'm going full gas, flat out, the last 10K. I think it is going to be a bit of a trial and error for people. So I think that's a good starting point. I'd go, right, do something like what you've just like I've just said. Like they do an hour time trial, or you look at heart rate data, pace data from races, and go, okay, I'm about on this fitness. The nice thing about the heart rate is that it's variable depending upon the conditions. So if it's windy,
Hills.
like that's going to accommodate. If it's a bit hotter, your heart rate's going to reflect that. Whereas pacing is not going to reflect that. If you just go off of like, right, I ran 4 minute Ks for an hour, in a time trial, like 95% of that is, I don't know, 4:15 a K. Like, well, 4:15 a K physiologically is very different if it's 30 degrees versus 10 degrees. If it's like 30K an hour winds versus 2K an hour winds. So that's why I quite like the heart rate. And that works well. But I set myself up like intermediate heart rate split. So, okay, right, I want to hit 170 about 30K. I don't want to hit 160. I don't want to hit 162 before 6K, before 12K. I don't want to hit 165. Like that's the sort of thing that I'm thinking about. And I will just I won't clock watch. What I do is I put on my watch. It's a beep every mile split, because I'm working in miles. I get the average heart rate for that mile, and I go, okay, what was that? Like 163. Oh, that's great. Right, I'll just keep running at this pace. Or if it's a bit higher, I go, right, I need to dial that back a bit. Otherwise, you end up just staring at your watch for 26.2 miles, 42K, and that's
not good.
psychologically really taxing. But I think the principle is just making sure you don't go off too hard, but you're paying attention. I'm also paying attention to how I'm feeling. Like I've run enough marathons. I've run so many marathons now with a good pacing strategy, but I think I could probably do it without the heart rate, because I just know what I should feel like. But I still use the heart rate just as a check-in, looking at the heart rate, looking at my perception of effort, like checking in of how I'm feeling. Do I think this is sustainable? And sometimes I go, well, you know what? I think I might be overcooking it here. And I look at my heart rate and go, oh, seems all right, and it turns out all right. Or sometimes I'm feeling a bit easy here, but my heart rate's a bit high, and actually I go, oh, maybe I am working a bit hard here, and I probably was the right decision to just hold it back a little bit. But I think the marathon rewards you for being patient. It's so much easier to run. A much easier way to run a good time is finishing hard in the second half. The recovery time after a marathon is so much better if you've paced it evenly or have a negative split. Like the ones that have taken me the longest to recover from are ones where I've run 2:27 and I've run the last half 5 minutes, 6 minutes slower than the first half. It's like, we've all done it. It's the worst feeling ever. You come out disappointed, and then it takes you 4 weeks to actually feel normal again.
Yeah. And it's no fun on race day. Like it shatters your
Oh,
confidence.
it's the worst thing. Yes. It's horrendous. Like you're going so slow, but the pace, the effort is so hard. It's miserable. Like running along the mile when you went out to run 2:15 and you've run 2:27, and like everyone's going past you, and it's just, you're in a world of pain. It's not a fun experience.
This is smart. So you're kind of saying you will then cut the safety rope of the heart rate at about 30K. So you'd probably have 39 minutes to go in the race. Like, is that something that you've experimented with? And we know different people finish in different times. Is that a rule for a 3.5 hour marathoner, that they can start cutting it at 2:50 kind of thing? Or like, is that something you've played around with as well?
Yeah, I mean, I've just sort of found that from then, you just want to ignore the heart rate. You just want to just actually, even if you're working so hard just to maintain the pace by then. And hopefully, if what you've done in the first 30K is set you up, but you're not gonna be too far off what you should be doing. So actually, you haven't gone out too hard. Hopefully, you've paced it. Yeah, for me, I find that worst case scenario, I'm even pace. Best case scenario, I can pick it up a little bit in the last 10K. But for me, it's like I just so ignore it then, because by then I'm just concentrating on working as hard as I can, but in a sustainable fashion, because I'm pretty tired by then. I am definitely hurting at like 30K, 32K into a marathon. And I'm just sort of counting down the Ks or miles in my head. And just trying to spread the effort more just of perception of effort rather than the heart rate. I'll look at the heart rate every mile, but I'm more just thinking about actually just pushing it as hard as I can to the end, because and I think I think that's the same for everyone. Maybe you want to hold off. Certainly, if like I know because I've used this strategy so many times now, I sort of know that I'm all right now just to let loose a little bit. And in quite a few of my marathons, but yeah, my last 10K has been my fastest. But sometimes like Valencia, I did pick it up a little bit in the last like 10K, but there was like a slower bit from like 20 to 25K, which I lost a bit of time in. But yeah, normally that is like a faster section for me, but it's I think a bit of trial and error, a bit of actually probably if you've not done it before, like erring on the side of caution, like, okay, maybe 6K to go, let the reins off, just like go flat out. But I think by then you should know, am I in trouble now? Or actually have I got the ability to push on a bit?
Yeah. Am I racing or
And
surviving?
historically I was always in trouble. And I realized that actually if you do pace it well, you can really run that last 10K pretty hard and you can get a minute back in the last 10K. Like, um, I think, yeah, I think, which is, I like, I think, at Manchester, I really, really went for it in the last like few miles. I think I averaged 5:10 a mile, but I ran like the last 10K in like 31:30 or something, which is like 5:02s, 5:03s. So like there was a couple of like 4:55s in there. So maybe I held a bit too much back, but yeah, I think certainly I'm not really thinking about pacing in the last 10K. I'm just thinking about maxing out the effort, trying to get to just finish as hard as I can, because regardless of how you've paced it, you're going to be hurting at 30, 32K. You just need to like just do what you can to get to the finish line.
Yeah. What about your fueling plan? Is there a number of amount of like carbs and stuff you try to tip in that first hour, or you work on per
Yeah, so
hour rate?
I'm pretty strict on my carb plan. I'm trying to hit 90 grams of carbs an hour. My preference is drinks if I can, but because you get the hydration and the fuel in one. But like Valencia, for example, I had to carry all my own gels. I didn't have elite bottles. I had like a sub-elite entry, so I could start at the front and like in a warm-up zone. But there's no drink support. So I just carried gels for that, and I've done that for a few marathons. But I know that right. 4 miles, I'm going to take a gel. Every 4 miles, I'm going to take a gel, and that works out as about 90 grams an hour. Just keeping it the same throughout. I've been using the SAS Beta Fuel, which is fine. I think for most of the gels are fine. I think you just want to make sure you've got something that's a mix of two different types of carbs. So like basically the limit to getting on the carbs is like the absorption in the gut. And without making it too complicated, there's different channels there that pull the sugars from your gut and into your blood. And historically, they always just had glucose in. Well, glucose, our max capacity for sucking up glucose is about 60 grams an hour. If you add like a different type of carb in, so fructose is normally what they use, you can get in and there's different transporters for fructose compared to glucose. So actually, you increase the amount of glucose you can pull out of the gut. So I found that I can get up to 90, even maybe a little bit higher than that, grams of carbs an hour. But it's something I practice in training first. Like when I started running marathons, I had a couple of Portaloo stops, pretty much every marathon. And I think I was just using the wrong type of gel, trying to take on too much, and actually just not practicing it in training. So I will go out in my last few specific like hard long runs and go, right, I'm going to try 90 grams an hour here. Or maybe in my first one, I might try 60 grams. That goes fine, right? I'll go 75 grams. For the next one, good, that's fine. 90 grams for the last one. Because you can train your gut as well. You can increase the amount of transporters to increase the sugar uptake. So I'm pretty strict with that. And actually, I just use the same thing every time now. And that works. That seems to work fine for me. Although I think, yeah, it's very much individual. Some people can just tolerate more than others. But I think practicing it is definitely the key, and just working out what's the max that I can take on race day without overdoing it, throwing up or ending up in the toilets. But that definitely makes a difference to being able to finish strong as well, and just pacing it better, because you might be pacing it great. Like you might be doing all those things, setting off at right intensity, but because you haven't taken enough carbs, like you just won't be able to even get to like that threshold heart rate because you're just depleted. You've just not got enough fuel to get to the finish line.
Yeah. And then I know in that thread as well, you spoke about cramping. So like often we do a listeners question segment every week, and we often get some questions about how do you deal with cramps and stuff. And I think your response was like it's more the conditioning. Like if you're fueling correctly and you're pacing correctly with the heart rate kind of data, that's a strength and conditioning kind of issue.
Yeah, I think you can, like, people always go on about electrolytes, and you can, like, if you think you can get severe cramps if you're very dehydrated, maybe not electrolytes, but if you lost a lot of salts or you're just dehydrated, and yeah, that can cause cramping. But actually, you normally talk about longer durations, like if you're going out for 6 hours, 7 hours. Like I've had cramps at the end of a 60K trail race that I did, which was very, very hot, and I didn't probably take on enough fluids. And I don't, and that I had some cramp more recently in a 50K trail race I did just a little bit, and I was really good at the fueling, trying to keep. I was probably, it was quite warm, didn't dehydrate enough, and I did get cramps then. But I think in a marathon, it's a lot of the time I think it's just actually the muscular conditioning from like are your legs prepared to run 42K pretty close to race pace. I think getting the pacing right helps as well. Like you're going to, I think if you've overloaded the first half, then actually you're just your muscles just can't handle the impact in the last 10K. But I think a lot of the times it is down to the conditioning of the muscles. It probably doesn't necessarily mean getting in the weight room and doing doing calf raises or whatever. I think it's probably just a case of the specific long runs, getting in, whatever that looks like for you, getting in. You just being prepared for the distance, to be honest. I think that's the most important thing. Maybe, probably, I'm sure there are people who are out there who are struggling with, maybe aren't quite getting the hydration up enough, or maybe they're particularly like salty sweaters or whatever. But the data about cramps and electrolytes is pretty it's not that great, to be honest. And I've seen examples in like in football, for example, where like a player was always getting cramps in the second half. Well, it's not. She was getting it all year round, so it wasn't hot, and it wasn't hot all the time. Like in a football match, you can hydrate at half time. This isn't a hydration issue. Like she did go and do some like calf capacity stuff because they're not doing that much running. So they went and did like some specific stuff in the gym and stopped getting cramps. I'm not saying that's not going to be the same for everybody. Some people, maybe it is a hydration thing, but most people, I think it's just the specific muscle conditioning.
Yeah, more running. Tell us about your training, mate. Tell us about like what does a general week look like when you say you're 6 months out from a marathon and you don't have a newborn child at home, like so you don't have any interruptions with your sleep and things like that. Like what does a perfect week of training look like?
Yeah, I think I do a pretty classic Tuesday session, Friday session, Sunday long run. I'm quite into doing threshold based intervals, and like if I'm not in a marathon specific phase, I'm probably doing something like that in both sessions. So trying to do like between 40 minutes and an hour's worth of intervals, like just below that threshold that I talked about earlier. So I'm paying attention. Like if you're doing such a big session, you can't, if you run them too hard, you just be too broken the next day. And I'm doing something pretty similar on the Tuesday and the Friday. Now, one of them might do shorter reps. I might do something like 3,400 on a track off 30 seconds and just running them in like 72, 71s, maybe getting down to 69s if I'm going really, really well.
Sorry, did you just say 30?
About 10K pace, that sort of
30
effort.
by 400.
Yeah, I've done that a few. Okay. That's been a bit of a staple. I've built up to that, but yeah, 3,400s. I've just a touch about faster speeds. Without it, like I think like doing 3,400s, but not running them too fast. You can get a lot of volume quality at quite a good speed without it being like flat out. And I find for me, like that's enough to run well over a 5K, a 10K. I don't need to do like like you might be. Yeah, people talk about doing like 5x2K or 6x600 like at 10K pace. I find that really hard. I prefer to like get in like a longer session like I said, doing like, maybe like 5 by 10 minutes, just below your threshold. And then, right, I'll do 3400s at 10K pace. And I think if I do that, that seems to work pretty well for me. I don't feel like I'm missing the specific stuff of the shorter events. And again, like saying about going back at how important the threshold is, most of the time in the marathon block, well, certainly in the early parts of my marathon block, I'm thinking I just need to get that threshold as high as I can, because that's my ceiling for how well I'm gonna do. And that's what I've seen when I'm testing myself before each race. It's like, right, if my threshold is 19.5K an hour, I'm gonna run well. If it's 18K an hour, it's not going to be a good day. Like, I'm not ready to run a good marathon. And you know that from training as well, but it's just putting a number on it. So actually, I need to get that in a good place before, and then actually doing the marathon specific sessions. Like, interestingly, going into Valencia where I did my PB, like, I knew I wasn't in shape. So I'd spent loads of time getting my threshold in a great place. I then tested myself. I was like, oh, I've actually overcompensated here. My threshold's fantastic. I haven't done enough marathon specific stuff. I think that's one of the reasons why I was slightly slower in the second half of Valencia by like 20 seconds or something compared to which was the only marathon I've in the last 6 but I haven't negative splitted. And I think that was because I hadn't done as much marathon specific stuff, because I was panicking about my general fitness. But actually then managed to get my threshold like in a really, really good place, but haven't done many hard, longer stuff. Like, I think I quite like doing either like 40K or running a bit slower than marathon pace, but like, at like 3:30 a K, or doing some just like classic long intervals at marathon pace. So like one staple I do is like 4 by 4 miles off a mile steady. So I try and run the miles, at marathon pace, looking at my heart rate as well. And then like the mile float, still running them pretty solid. So I run them in like 5:40s. And that's a great, if you nail that, you're ready to run a good marathon.
Yeah, strong. And then, like, so when you're saying like 40 to 60 minutes worth of threshold work on one of the days, will you break that up? Like, will you do it in, 10-minute segments, or you mix it up a bit?
Oh yeah.
Doesn't matter how you get your 40 to 60 minutes?
Yeah, I pretty much never run any continuous tempos. I sometimes I do, but I just find it really it's mentally hard.
Mental, yeah.
I don't think there's any. I think you can break it up and get the same benefits. You can probably run a bit faster if you break it up, compared to just doing continuous things. So yeah, I'll typically do anything from 5 to 10 minute intervals. Sometimes I might do threes. But yeah, classic might be 5 to 6 times, or 4 to 6 times 10 minutes, or 8 to 10 times 5 minutes, that sort of thing. Off just like a minute, 90 seconds, just walk. I often do it on the treadmill. Like the weather can be pretty bad here in the UK, and I've got a nice lab treadmill I've got access to, so I often go on that. Or I'm just running in the parks around. I don't run on the track too much, just it gets boring running those long sessions around the track, but sometimes I do. But yeah, I think that's probably like staples for me, is just doing those sort of sessions, combining it with like I said, some shorter ones like minutes or 400s off a short recovery. And actually, that's sort of like a threshold session. If I took my heart rate, I'm looking at my heart rate, it's pretty similar to what I'm doing in the long efforts. My lactate levels are pretty similar. It feels a bit harder because you're just running a bit faster, but it's still pretty controlled.
Yeah. And the point here, like, there'll be some listeners out there going, oh, it sounds like it's so much. But the point here is it's controlled, and that Tuesday will often be like slower than threshold. Like you can have a minute walk and you're bouncing back easy.
Yeah, just a little bit. I think just a little bit, like, and often I'll start a bit conservatively and like build into the session. So I might, like, again, I often use heart rate. I'm using heart rate for these sessions as well. So my cap is 170 heart rate. My max is about 186. So I've got to be like flat out in a race to hit that sort of heart rate. But I can see 186. 170 is typically my threshold goes. And the first ones I might hit 160, and then halfway I'm hitting 165. Maybe at the end I'm hitting 170. Just picking it up. But I think that's the thing. Like, I'm so much I've been doing this for a while now, but previously I was pretty classic, like Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday sessions. Not that big a session, but like maybe I do like 6 by a mile or 6 by 5 minutes, and I'd be like flat out on the last one. Like if I'd be like in a P, I would be much more in a hole after doing 6 by 5 minutes at like 10K pace than doing 6 by 10 minutes actually a bit more comfortable. And actually the intensity is only a little bit less, but because the recovery is just so much better. You can do twice as much running, and that's what I found for me. Like I've been running so long that I need pretty big sessions to get some sort of stimulus. I think, just doing, I mean, back in the day, like as a kid, running 10 400s on the track off a minute, like that wouldn't, that wouldn't do anything for me now. Like I would just hurt like hell, and I'd be rubbish. Like, and for me, again, I've got no speed. Like my wife's run quicker over 400 meters than me. I think my best is like 58.7 or something, and I couldn't go, and I've never been able to run faster than that. But so if I went and ran, like, I'm going to do 10 400s off a minute, which is all right, really, 1200s per minute. That's a classic session, isn't it, for 1500 meter race. Well, I could probably run them. Maybe I could run them in 64s, maybe, but I could do 3400s in 69s.
Yeah.
So like, I'm doing twice as much running, only a little bit slower. That's going to get me a better response. And I'm probably going to be less in a hole afterwards as well. Like, I'm not going to have that lactate feeling and not be able to walk the next day because I'm so stiff. Like, I'll be fine. So I think just playing around with if you're increasing the duration of your sessions, you need to drop the intensity, definitely. Like if you're trying to go and if you've been doing like hard, intense sessions and you go, right, I'm going to do more, it's going to be a recipe for disaster if you don't just drop the intensity. Like you're just going to get injured, ill, overtrained, like one of those things.
So good. You also have the ability to jump on the treadmill in the different kind of super shoes and test out your running economy in them. Like that must be fun over the years. Have you got a new pair of a pair of the new Adidas ones? They've just launched in Australia recently.
I would like a pair. I'd like to get my hands on them. I ran Valencia in the Adios Pro 3s. I ran my Manchester, which is a few seconds slower, in the Nike Alpha Flies. I've compared them in the lab, identical, exactly the same, like to the mill.
Is that Alpha Fly 1?
So, yeah. I've not tried the Alpha Fly 2s, but the original Alpha Flies. And I wore them for quite a long time. I really like them. I've still got them in my cupboard, pretty beaten up. There's a chunk missing because I wore them in a trail race and a bit fell off the edge. But it's funny though, because before I test them, I would have said Alpha Flies much faster. They just feel faster. They feel different. The Adios Pro 3s felt fine, but they didn't feel particularly different to running in a normal shoe. Like a bit more bounce, but I would have bet my life on it. Alpha Flies quicker. Test them in my lab, exactly the same. When I've run races, I'm running the same times. I think it's actually very hard to tell just from how they feel. Sometimes you can tell, like, if you put on a pair of old school flats and you compared it to super shoes, the super shoes feel better, they feel faster, obviously. But yeah, getting in the lab is quite cool. I recently looked at the On Echo, I can't remember what they're called. They got complicated names on there. Cloud Boom Echo 3, is it? Something like that. One of their carbon plated racers. And the Hoka Rocket X2s. And I compared it to the Adios Pro 3s. Adios Pro 3s were still it was fun. I did it at 3 different speeds. And actually, at the faster speeds, the Adios Pro 3s and the On shoes were pretty much identical. But at the slower speeds, the Adios Pro 3s were better. The Hoka Rocket X2s are still pretty good, but not quite as good as the other two. Yeah. But we're talking like a percentage point here. Like we're not talking big percentage points. It's not like comparing non-carbon shoes to carbon shoes. I think all the brands they're not too far off each other now. I think there's a bit of individual variation as well. Like some people are just going to respond better to different shoes. depending on how you land, what speed you're running at as well. Like I think some shoes probably are better at just like if you're running at, regardless of who you are, if you're running at 20k an hour, that's very different to racing at 15k an hour. The forces going through the shoe are going to be different. But yeah, I think that's something I quite like playing around with the shoes. It's quite good fun. I'm lucky enough that I got these On shoes I got given from a race, which I was very grateful for. So I thought, right, I'll go and see how they compare. The Hoka Rocket X2s were given by a rep who I tested in the lab, and this was before we were charging for testing, and he said, "Oh, can I give you anything?" And I said, "No, I can't physically can't take your money at the minute." He said, "Oh, here's a pair of Hoka Rocket X2s," and I was very grateful for them, and they were. I really like them. They're really nice shoes to run in, and I traded them quite a bit, but they're probably just not quite as good for me anyway. For in terms of to racing, I think they're probably not quite as fast.
Yeah, and
I'm a bit of a shoe nerd.
Yeah, I get the example about people running at different paces, but is there data around there? Say there's two people, three people who all want to run, say, a 220 marathon, which is easy, like around that 319, 320 pace a kilometre. And so the pace is the same, but how different can the data be on their technique and like weight? Can that be significant, or is that still going to land pretty similar spot regardless to considering their same paces?
So it's hard to say because like what I would say is that most of the effect is the effects of the shoe. So actually, I don't see people testing badly in Adios Pro 3s, Nike Alpha Flies. They're consistently good. But I think there probably is some individual variation in terms of like their mechanics, potentially. Like you said, the weight could be a factor as well. Like I've got this idea that maybe like if you're stronger, if you're heavier, maybe you get more out of the shoe because you're putting more force into the shoe, and it is like effectively like a spring. So if you're putting more in, maybe you're getting more out.
Yeah, one of my co-hosts, he's a super responder.
I think there's something to say that maybe like the really light Ethiopians and Kenyans maybe aren't getting as much from a shoe because they are lighter. And there's, at the top end, times have moved on a bit, but like if you look at like Kipchoge was running, 201s with the shoe and without the shoe. Like I think there's not much variation. Maybe he would. I can't quite remember when he started running them now, but the times haven't moved on as much, I'd say, in the top end compared to people running 220, 230, 240. The amount of people going sub 3 hours now is crazy. Yeah. And sub 220, like domestically. I don't know if it's in the UK. I don't know if it's the fact that marathons become more popular again, or that it's hype around the shoes and just more people who go into a marathon, or if it's the shoes themselves. But the amount of people running on 220, like some years, like in the 2010s, you'd get like 4 or 5 people running under 220. And like now you're getting 50, 60, which is just completely insane. I do think that maybe, I think slower people might be getting, or slower people, heavier people might be getting more out of the shoes than maybe a super light person who's already really economical to start with as well. There's too many variables, I think, to really know, and it's really hard to do this research. And it's not like an area I'm specifically doing research in either. But I think there are lots of still unknowns about who gets the most out of a shoe. Maybe you can get more out of a shoe by getting stronger, so you can put more force into the ground. Maybe if you get, I don't know if you've already got really good elastic tendons, you get less because you're out of the shoe because you've already got that capacity. I don't know. Or maybe it's additive. Maybe you get the elasticity of your tendons plus the shoe, you get like super springy. I don't know. It's pretty complicated. So yeah, I think what I would say is that if you got the opportunity to go somewhere and get tested in a few different pairs of shoes, it's a pretty easy win. Like because we calculated for those 3 shoes, like the On, the Hoka, and the Adios Pro 3s. Although they were very similar, it still equated to like 90 seconds over a marathon, which is quite an easy way to save some time. Like to get 90 seconds fitter when you're already pretty fit is pretty difficult. But if you can go, right, I'm going to wear those shoes and they're going to get me 90 seconds over another pair of shoes, then and that would translate to more in a slower. That's equating to like a 3 hour marathon. Like if you were slower, it's going to equate to more, like 2.5 minutes. And that's just three different shoe types. Maybe there's a shoe for me that is even more efficient. Like get that latest Adidas one. Maybe that's 2 minutes over a marathon, which is goes from nearly making a team to making a team. So
yeah, because the boys were talking about that on our Shoe Geeks episode this week. How because one of them's got a pair, and just how much lighter it is compared to I think they were comparing it to the Adidas Meta Speed Edge Paris, one of those ones. Like, this is 211 guy talking about that, and he's talking about it could be 100 grams. I think he was saying difference, nearly 100 grams. So
yeah, so I've heard on a podcast recently with Jeff Burns, but basically it's the same type of like PEBA foam, but it's most of the shoes all the shoes basically got compressed PEBA foam. So it makes it slightly more dense and slightly less bouncy, but they last a lot longer. Whereas this new Adidas one is uncompressed, which means it's a lot lighter because there's just more air in it, and it's bouncier, but it's a lot less resilient, which is why it only lasts for 2 marathons. Yeah. So I think it's the same sort of design, just not compressed. It's basically the same foam, just not as compressed as much. And that's how that's the reason why it seems to save more energy, because it's a lot lighter, probably got a bit more bounce, but it is probably only going to last a couple of marathons.
So they take it out of the oven early, but then charge you three times as much.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Hey Dan, I've got a couple more questions to go. This has been amazing. I could so easily go for another hour. But first up is, what's like Dan's plan from here on in? Like, is it still, you got inspirations to go quicker and make a team? Like, are there singlets up for grabs if you can get down to 212, 213 in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to try and make a European team. I think that's probably like my limit, to be honest. Like, I've heard rumours it might be a 212 you'd need to run for the European Road Running Champs next year. I think that is within my limit. I've got a really big VO2 max, which basically means, I've got a really big VO2 max. My VO2 max consistently comes out at 80 mil per kilogram per minute. I'm not that economical, but it's getting better slowly. But what that big VO2 max means is I've got the capacity to hopefully just keep nudging those thresholds a bit higher. So I feel like my limit was probably best case scenario, if everything went perfectly and I could get like all the training I wanted done without injuries, I reckon 211 would be doable. Maybe it's a guess, isn't it? But we'll see. I'm going back to Valencia in December. I'd like to get under a 214, get a 214 or a bit, sub 214 would be fantastic. I'd take a PB, like we were saying. Just a PB is it's so hard to come by these days, but I'd just take a PB. But I'd love to get at least under 215. Try and make a European team. And to be honest, I'm going to keep running the marathons, but I've dabbled with the ultras. I'd like to go and do some more of that. I'd like to go run 100k on the roads, which most people think, why would you want to do that? But it's like another target. I feel like I could be properly internationally competitive at that sort of distance. I think I'm built for that. I've got no speed. I get longer the better I go. And I think you get rewarded for those sort of things for just being meticulous in your preparations, for planning, for executing it really well, getting the fueling right. So yeah, I'm going to keep running marathons. I'd love to get that sub 14 and sub 29. That's still on my cards, but as soon as I've done that, I'm done with the shorter stuff. I'll still race it, but like priority is like marathons and longer. Try and make if the next Commonwealth Games happens, try and make that team. Try and make a European team. Yeah, run a bit faster, then just go longer and longer.
Yeah, because we haven't mentioned, like, you were the UK, the British 50k record holder when you cut third at the 50k World Championships. Were they was it Poland? Have I got that right?
That was Romania.
Romania, 249.01.
Yeah, that was after I qualified for that after running my 215 at Manchester. That was a bit of a whim, and I just had a chance to get a GB vest, and I was like, well, yeah, I'll do that. I've never, I did a World University cross country champs, in 2014, and that was like my only sort of international I'd done. But yeah, chance to get GB vest, did that, and actually surprised myself, came third there. I went and did the European 50k champs a couple of years ago now, and that was just after when was that? Yeah, my son had just been born, and training was going very badly, and I underperformed really. I came seventh, which was all right, but I think I wasn't in shape really. And I did a 50k trail race along the South Downs Way in the UK, which is on the trails, very pretty. It was good prize money, which is why I went to do it. And I do like the longer stuff as well, but at the minute I haven't gone past 50k. Properly. But yeah, I do like the trails. I like being able to. I like 50k is nice because you're still running fast.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to go. I wouldn't. Doesn't appeal to me going and plodding around for 24 hours or whatever. But like even in 100k, like I should be running like 3:45 a k for that sort of distance. I think. And I'm running. My 50k time. I think I averaged like 3:23, 3:24 a k on a pretty hot and undulating day in Romania. So like you're still running at a good pace. I think once it goes past that, I'm not sure if I'm that interested. But
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah,
I get that. Hey, the last question I always ask is, do you have a book on the bedside table at the moment? Something you're reading at the moment? Like, are you a bit of you get into the academic data, scientific stuff in your spare time as well, or what's on the bedside table, or a Netflix series you're watching?
Yeah, the problem is I've run out of all the popular running books. I've read them all, so they've all done pretty much. I've had time for reading these days. I'm more stuck on a laptop reading academic papers, which I'm flicking through Twitter because I love Twitter and just seeing something interesting. Go, oh, actually, here's a link to a nice article. I'll give that a read. And I'm not very good at reading a classic book anymore. And we just watch rubbish on Netflix. To be honest, I wouldn't bother sharing any of my my what we watch there. My wife's in charge of the remote, and she won't listen to this, so she won't mind me saying it's rubbish.
Yeah.
No, I'm a bit of I spend too much time on my phone in the evenings scrolling through Twitter and just reading articles that people share. And I like the shoe tech one's really interesting. We're quite interested in this concept of durability. So actually, talking about, if you're below your thresholds, like what intensity there can you sustain? You're not, although you're in a steady state, like some people are going to deteriorate a lot more quickly than others. And thinking about the Tour de France, it's not about being able to just even pace it. It's about being able to put out a really big effort at the end of a 6-hour, 5-hour day. And that's probably your physiology at the end of a long race is not going to look the same as at the start. Like your VO2 max is not going to be the same. Actually, and that seems to be really predictive of performance, certainly in like Tour de France and probably the marathon as well. Like, can you maintain your you basically don't have too much drift in your heart rate and your oxygen consumption over the course of a marathon. Like that's going to be quite important.
Yeah. And that podcast you referred to before with Dr. Jeff Burns, was that the Science and Art of Good Running, the Science and Sport podcast with Ross Tucker?
That's it.
Yeah, just come out the last couple of days.
Podcast I recommend if you haven't listened to that one.
Yeah, a few people sent it through just the last 24 hours, so I'm looking forward to getting into that. Dan, it's been amazing. 71 minutes went super fast. As I said, I probably could have spoke to you for another hour. Twitter's the best place for people interested. I think you put all your stuff on Strava as well.
Yeah, all my running's on Strava. I'm trying to. I had a bit of a hiatus from Twitter, so I spend too much time on it. But I am on Twitter, and I try and put out some interesting stuff every now and again. I am on Instagram. I'm not that active on Instagram. We've got our Sport Physiology Hub Instagram account as well, which is where I basically show all the testing that we do, and we get some pretty cool people in there, and you get a bit of an insight of what the testing is we do. I'm going to try and make it a bit more educational. So like sharing bits like actually, how can you use this data? Why is this data useful, helpful for you? So if you're interested in that, go and check us out. But yeah, I think Twitter's probably the best place.
Oh, amazing, mate. All the best with the upcoming races, the prep for Valencia. And massive thanks for giving up some time for the Inside Run podcast. I know those people listening, especially those ones with marathons coming up soon, would have got so much out of that. So, yeah, really appreciate it.
Oh, cheers, Brady. Great to talk to you.